There we go. Hello and welcome. Welcome. We haven't done one of these in a good long while, so let's kick it off. Tonight I've got with me Gilius Van Phalenful, one of my old friends. Gilius.
Hello.
And we've also got Connor Alexander, also goes by Goeep on the IRC channels. And tonight we're missing our usual third partner, Non-Servitor. He's kind of not feeling under the weather, so tonight we'll just be discussing the SPJ results, somewhat belated. We've all been very busy. The meaning behind the Hugo results and who exactly won that. Side hint, it's actually Vox Day, and the meaning of the word Cucksurvitive. I think it's one of the more interesting words that's popped up, and what it kind of means behind the thought of the right wing in America. Right, so starting off with SPJ, did you guys all watch it?
Yes.
For the most part, yeah.
I did not manage to catch the morning stream. It was back during my phase when I was sleeping weird hours, so I missed the morning stream. I did catch all of the second stream and the bomb threat. So reports say that the first stream went pretty well, pretty much without any confrontation or issues. Would you feel safe to say that?
I'll say yes. They didn't get to use their 5 examples because they get asked questions and they ran out of time, but they got 3 examples in, and yeah, for the most part, they were able to say what they wanted and elaborate the point, and you had the people on the other panel actually acknowledging these were issues, but.
I heard that that they were actually acknowledging that these were proper issues that needed to be considered. Especially God, I can't remember her name now, but the female panelist,
Lynn Walsh.
Thank you, Lynn Walsh, was definitely saying, "I didn't realize it was quite so bad," or something to that effect.
Yeah, or like she says, she personally would never, like, if one of her journalists basically were also related or roommate with some of the restaurants she's covering, she wouldn't send. There'd be a disclosure, but she wouldn't even send that person and use someone else just to ensure impartiality as much as possible. Like, it's like the lack of disclosure is bad, but the funny part is that like, as I said, she wouldn't even send that person. She'd use someone else.
That's fair enough. No, I didn't actually. As I said, I didn't actually manage to get to watch the first event.
There was one part.
There is videos around. I just haven't got around to it. So.
Ren, I forgot his last name, but Ren was always curious to why this became such a big issue. Though he acknowledges things were unethical, he always felt like
he
the
always
passion.
Wondered why it exploded here and why it
and
so long.
that sadly falls into the afternoon panel. That would basically address that question in theory, but but he did ask, like, why were you guys so vehement about it? But again, this was about ethics and journalism, and let's be honest, the fuel of GamerGate is fanned by the annoyance of something pushing the corruption.
Yes. I would say you're pretty much right there. No, I found that the summations of the first stream pretty much told me that, pretty much a complete win there. There was no real contentions that there was anything other than issues, though perhaps some might say that it would be mild issues compared to that of other more pressing issues.
Yeah.
So, in truth, let's move on to the second discussion, the afternoon discussion. I think that was perhaps the more interesting one from that perspective. So, for me personally, I found Kuskesi's tendency to interrupt people when they were trying to say something rather annoying.
Yes.
He did that a lot. And I remember the ISU chat was quite big about that, saying, "Look, just let them speak. You can, they're trying to answer your questions here. The fact that you keep interrupting them means that they can't answer them."
Yeah. That one, I think Sargon, and I heard others saying, is like, from one perspective, this is to sympathize temporarily before pointing out Kerensky's mistake, is that Kerensky seemed to want to drive the discussion away from the social issue and discuss like what can we do from now on not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But as Milo and even Summers pointed out, is like you have to understand what the mistake is. I mean, it's like Kerensky's right. Like, don't talk about feminism; it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. Don't talk about feminism. But it's like, yeah, but you realize that as long as you stick to this mental narrative, you're just going to repeat the mistake. Like, it sucks. Yeah. It sucks, but, news flash to the panelists on the other side, feminism sucks. But the thing is, but the point is that these people were trying to explain, like, how the narrative was being used to propagate a lie, or like the behavior of people, like they would only interview one half and then run with whatever they say and no verification, or like we had that recently happen just like, was it a week ago, less than a week ago, with like GamerGate, with the shooting that happened, and it's like you got to explain why, because here's the thing, because Lynn Walsh, I mean, admittedly she probably doesn't realize that this is a big issue, but she's like, well, why wouldn't they do their job right, well, that's the thing, is that it's not pure incompetence. It's not incompetence on the part of Gawker and the others. They have an agenda, they have a narrative, and that needs to be explained. Unless the other person understands that, you can't be like, oh, we're going to not repeat those mistakes. Oh God.
That's not really a phenomena that I've really seen. I don't think I've ever run into the claim that we shouldn't talk about something because it's in the past. That was so sort of.
I think he was trying to build some level of credibility there, because if you're an outsider looking in and you're just ranting about, well, I don't mean to say ranting, but if it looks like ranting about a social issue, it kind of makes you think, okay, so what does this have to do with your supposed claim about being about ethics? And I suppose that's where he was coming from, to be charitable to him.
That's it. But the problem with that, as you said, like, you need to discuss the past. And I can't remember the YouTuber's name, but he said it best when he overviewed this. He has this sort of weird links with. But I do apologize if like someone he gets here that I have no clue who the fuck he is. He basically said that the ultimate end of the day is that, and this is outside of the SPJ. This is a very short tangent, but let's be honest. The people that are fucking up journalism and being annoying in social media, basically they have a code of ethics. Their code of ethics is being progressive. And this is why they don't care about journalism ethics and all that. So ultimately, as long as these people have this air quote outlook, then they're activists. They're not journalists, they're activists. And they think being a journalist is being an activist. So of course they're always going to bend the story. They're always going to lie. They're always going to manipulate the information. They're always going to misrepresent, because the ethics is social change, not reporting facts. And
there's an issue with that to a degree.
No, that's what's happening though. This is how. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So, if you look at the the history of Western journalism, it did sort of take off in the 1880s, the 1890s, with people like Randolph Hearst and Pulitzer and Ida Tarbell reporting on the steel corruption or the oil corruption in Pennsylvania. Upton Sinclair's Jungle sort of revealing the really obscene working condition of the inner city poor. And then people figured out, holy shit, like this thing that we're doing where we're reporting to people about their own conditions and what's going on around them is really powerful. And then there's sort of this code of ethics that got developed, and it sort of became detached from what its roots were, and then you sort of evolve into what we have today, where it's sort of people are looking to the profession of journalism is sort of I think a lot of people see journalism as being so corrupt and ineffective and non-relevant today, because it sort of lost that it's roots. But I don't know that that's right.
What do you mean right? No,
I don't know
it's
if
wrong.
it's a good idea. Yeah, I don't know if it's a good idea to take something like the Fourth Estate, which is supposed to be objective in its reporting, and give it an ideology and a direction.
No, I fully agree with you. I wasn't defending this stance. I was just saying that is what's happening, and that's what's wrong. And until you make normal journalists who have a semblance of still believing in the original ethics, like that's what, like I'll be honest, I think Lynn Walsh sees herself as a real journalist in the classical roots, and it's going to be a difficult uphill battle. But you have to make these people see that, hey, your peers are not who you think they are. You know, it sucks to realize, like, you know, trust me, I've experienced this in my own life where you realize you're the only sane or intelligent or honest person in a room of liars or thieves. At the end of the day, you're right, is that it's not a good thing. This is what happened to journalism. But I think people need to understand that before they could understand what went wrong and how we could move forward from then.
Right.
Because as you said, in the past, they were promoting change, but it was promoting change based on the truth, because the things they were reporting was real. It wasn't. It wasn't.
You lay out the facts, and
and from the facts you get an opinion. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, like, I mean, it's so, like, it would be okay. So if you have an issue with, let's say, you know, if you're a feminist and you take issue with what you perceive to be the male-dominated workplace, you know, it's okay to be, as a journalist, take on something like that, and you sort of go and investigate and say, this is what I investigated. But when you cross the line, or where you cross the line is, this is what I investigated, and it equals X.
Yeah.
You, like, as a journalist, you don't get to say it equals X. That's sort of the reader's job. That's what you're giving to them.
Exactly.
That may say X, Y, Z, or X, Y, and you know, Y, Z, or whatever.
Yeah. And this is reference to Ash Scow. She was saying this is the whole Rolling Stones debacle with this. The example you gave made me think is that they didn't go, like, let's say you want to report rape culture. Rape culture is bullshit, but let's say there's still rape that does happen, and you want to raise awareness. So you go out, find a real rape story, present it, and then let the people decide what's going on with the statistics and everything. But instead what they did is they went and they looked for the most outrageous rape story, because it will be the most sensationalist, and heaven hold behold, it turns out to be a bullshit lie. And it's like going, like, let's be honest, rapes do happen on campuses. Even if the numbers are going down and it's not as bad as the feminists say, it still happens. But and if you as a journalist feel you want to bring attention to that, that's fine, but bring a real rape story. Don't go find something that, you know, this girl got gangbanged by 16 guys in a row, because, you know, it makes the story look more shocking, and not care you're reporting.
It turns out that all of them were away at the time.
Yeah. It's not even a convincing
away in two separate states.
Yeah. You know, and it's like, wait a minute, so why did you go with this story? Why? And I mean, I can't read thoughts, but I have a weird feeling is because the real rape stories she found were probably banal. Like, no offense, but it'd be like to the victims, but it would literally be like, you know, I was with my boyfriend and, you know, I wasn't ready, and then he pressured me, and then, you know, and then you're going like, yeah, this seems like the story we've heard a million times, and it's tragic. If anything, the guy should be prosecuted. At no point do I deny that.
But not by the court of public opinion, and I think
exactly.
I think that's the underlying issue.
Yeah, that's
that there's a push to basically convict people through public shaming, and I don't even.
Let's be fair. And you're right. And if you're going to convict people by public shaming, a rape story that you heard a million times will not create an outrage. Gangbang bitch 17 happening in real life might.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of, you get used to that. You get used to it, and then it ceases to become relevant. It's just sort of like, oh, that's just, you know, that sort of rape that you're talking about becomes as what's the word? Commonplace as, you know, children starving around the world.
Exactly.
So the media sort of tries to fluff up and generate outrage and interest.
But here's the funny part. I'm going to say, sorry to cut you off, but what I love the point you said is that I find that this is exactly the problem you said, that it becomes commonplace. And before someone listening, I know I think our audience, but let's say a feminist gets wind of this, would be like, and this is why there's a rape culture. Be like, I'm sorry, but the reason why the common rape stories become commonplace is because of you, because you're the ones who kept repeating these stories a million times. You numbed the people to it. and now you have to exaggerate to hold their attention. They created their own monster. You know, like children starving. Why doesn't it hurt us anymore? Like you see children starving, we don't give a rat's ass.
Because we've had like what 3 major press concerts about it. We keep hearing about it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is the news isn't the place to sort of drum up support for social movements.
Yeah.
The news is the place to sort of report on them, but
thank you. Yeah.
I mean, where you drum up that support is through things like IRC channels, online petitions, online image and chat boards, places like Reddit and Vote, actual physical meetings where you set up with people in your local area, local outreach. And it seems like that's hard. It takes work, and people just want to go straight for the biggest, the biggest resource that gets the most outreach, and so that's the media. And if you can own a media company and you've got an agenda, you're gonna get the biggest reach. So I think it's one of the issues is sort of looking at the media as a platform to speak rather than a platform for getting news.
And I think we now went off the bat of the evening conference, but I think this afternoon. But I think this is what the afternoon conference was trying to do in them as minimalistic way as possible by just presenting how the feminist narrative was overexploited to do that. And I think Kaczynski wasn't letting them. And considering that we actually went into a tangent to try to explain this, indicates how difficult the subject is. So you had these 3 people, Young, Summers, and Milo had their work cut out for them, that in under 2 hours they need to convey this without going too much into tangential conversation. Like, we can do it, but if they did it, it would feel off topic for the panel. So they had to stay on topic while conveying the same information we did now. Not easy. And having a bearded man cutting you off every 10 seconds makes it harder. If you hear this, Kaczynski, I'm singling you out, buddy.
Who? You mean Koretsky?
Koretsky, right. Koretsky. Yeah, not Kaczynski. Sorry. Koretsky. I'm singling you out, Koretsky.
It's weird.
I know you're... Actually, Koretsky, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I think you're well-intentioned. But I'm not sure why... I'm not sure why you were so obsessed to, cut them off. You're going, it's not going to lead to the conversation we want. But the conversation you wanted can't happen. I'm sorry, but you're trying to fly the car without...
It can't happen until you explain why this is a problem, and why this is a problem is because of X, Y, and Z that you don't want to talk about. So it's how do you keep yourself from repeating the same mistakes? You got to learn from history, and if you don't, well, you're just going to end up repeating the exact same mistakes.
Yeah, and I think this is why people accusing, and Kerensky ever wonders why he gets this accusation levied against him, is because of this. Because you're going assuming we're giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's well-intentioned, that the only explanation, and then he's not there to cover up the narrative, as it were, then the only logical explanation you could deduce is that he wants GamerGate to organize as an actual movement. And this is something Kerensky was accused of for a while. And things like this feed into this perception of him. Because you're going why are you so obsessed? Why are you so obsessed that we don't talk about the problems of the past and only discuss how to move on forward? Because in the process, GamerGate itself would have to choose. Remember, he was trying to tell, would it be okay if they contact
Starcraft? We would have to formalize a rote of values, meanings, and so on and so forth, and the ethics of it. We would essentially have to formalize a lot of stuff that is just being done ad hoc at the moment.
He doesn't like the idea of leaderless movements, and he's basically trying to use GamerGate as a test bed that if GamerGate becomes an actual organized movement, then it might set precedents that every single internet outrage afterwards would do the same thing. And then I don't know what he's expecting out of this, a journalism prize from Nobel Peace Prize of Journalism, or I don't know what his endgame was. And I'm going I personally don't know what his motives are, but I'm going, when you act this way, you're leading people to believe that you have this ulterior motive of making GamerGate an organized movement.
Either that or he's just incompetent, but I tend not to think that's the case.
Yeah.
He doesn't strike me as someone who's incompetent who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, no. I think exactly, and I also think that his intentions are not necessarily bad either. I've seen him interact. Yeah, I don't get that vibe that, that there's something icky. I mean, he's either a magnificent bastard, but if he's a magnificent bastard, he won't be this obvious in his agenda either. So I'm going like, no, I think he means well, but there is some kind of framework in his mind that he doesn't want to budge from. And I understand he has years of experience that validate his belief, and I understand that. But we are dealing with a pivotal moment of cultural change in our society. I don't want to sound, but Kerensky, you and like all of us, we're in something bigger than we could ever imagine.
Well, it's something new. I mean, Occupy Wall Street is probably the closest comparison, and it was largely physical. You could go and interview people there, more or less, and even it tried to organize to some degree by having spokespeople. I mean, it didn't exactly do well, but it tried to organize. And to bring it back down, it's like SPJ is probably the closest we've come to that. And overall, who we sent spokespeople. Hopefully they don't turn into leaders, but we sent spokespeople in order to convey our case, and they just kept getting interrupted. Perhaps that's just because of who we chose. We did choose for the final panel, especially. We did choose one freelance journalist who has an anti-feminist bent, one anti-feminist scholar, and Milo Yiannopoulos, who, despite being fabulous, is
antagonistic.
Yes.
And I think that's and I don't fault Milo, honestly. Honestly, I think they would have had less to speak if it wasn't for Milo. Ironically, Milo might have antagonized Kerensky, sorry, but he also was able to make Kerensky back off a bit. Ironically, I have a feeling that if you only had like a third mild-spoken person like Summers and Young, let's say
it would have been much less.
Yeah.
And just speaking from surprise, the one part of surprise from me was Derek Smart. I was not expecting him to be, perhaps not sympathetic, but at least understanding in the issues. And you can't. Especially in one of his quotes, it's like, someone reports a crime of loud noises, and then you end up finding about drugs.
Yeah.
It was a quote, I can't remember the full paraphrase, but the ultimate conclusion is that nobody really cares now about the initial...
Oh, the quote is, if someone calls in about a smell, the police finds a dead body.
Yeah. No one cares about the smell anymore.
Yeah. And that's basically, I think he was making reference that that's what the Zoe Quinn fiasco is. Zoe Quinn is no offense, which basically for me means offense intended. Zoe Quinn was the smell, and we found a dead body. Sorry, Zoe Quinn, but we don't care about your stink anymore.
She's relevant in so much as that she's connected to people of relevance, but her own personal relevance has long since come to an end.
Yeah.
So I found Derek Smart to be contributions to be oddly helpful throughout that stream, especially some of the stuff he did start saying about how they aren't exactly wrong, the gamers, and the press haven't exactly helped their case by constantly attacking them and shoving the actual racists, misogynists, and the normal people into the same foxhole. But no, I think the overall conclusion for SPJ has to be, yes, it was somewhat helpful, and it did convince me that. All right, so assuming that the independent journalists that did come were relatively representative, I don't suspect that a lot of what's going on cannot be classified as ideologically based. I think there's a huge issue of economics here that doesn't get addressed enough in the overall GamerGate equation. Is that it seems to be that there seems to be a lot of pressure that's for someone to bung out 5 stories every week in order to make it financially viable.
Yeah. But that's the problem. But I think you're downplaying the ideological impact. What happens is because everyone's busy doing what you're describing, what happens is the ideologues that are in the system take advantage of it. You know, you only need one crook in a neighborhood to break all the windows. You know. Continue. Sorry, you just.
No, you are right. It's like it doesn't mean that it becomes easy to slip that sort of stuff in, but overall, I do think that most of the people that are well-intentioned, and I think it's important to remember that most people are well-intentioned. It's just, like most of us, they're so busy and they've got so many requirements put upon them that because of the shrinking press model and the shrinking advertising revenue, that ultimately, they just don't have the time to go out and do the investigation.
Yeah, and then if you combine that with what we were discussing a little earlier with Connor, that the fact that what I was saying to him is that and then also you said they're too busy, and also what we're coming at them is you realize a lot of your colleagues are bad. And to people who have is too busy working and not thinking that there is a degradation by a couple who are corrupting the entire system, you're basically walking. It's like, guess what? The fools have taken over the asylum, and you're like, to many people, this is probably a little bit of a hurdle to mount.
And especially considering how complicated the whole issue is.
Yeah,
Ultimately, I think it's a very complicated issue that requires a lot of time to come close to the truth, and ultimately, I suppose most people just don't have the time for it, especially when they've got deadlines to meet that involve lots and lots of stories to be written.
Yeah, I said most people are just pressured, not paying attention. The few that take advantage of this create small cliques of their own. They dominate. Like, let's be fair. Let's say even all of CNN and MSNBC are not completely corrupt, but you have enough people at these major news agencies that all of them reported against GamerGate, very Gawker style. Same thing with ABC. And going sure, maybe the everyday journalist that works for them are not in this collusion, but you just have to have the right person at the right place, and he's like, oh, I have this scoop, and then people just buy into the narratives. And I think that's what Summers was trying to speak up, is that to people, you hear oh, women are in trouble, and in our society, I think that was Summers' point.
It's an easy narrative to grasp.
Yeah,
easy
most
narrative
of us,
to sell.
Even us, we're probably really pissed off at feminists. We're probably as MRA can be without actually being an MRA, unless you actually am an MRA. Yeah. And let's be honest, if we see a woman in trouble, tell me you don't get the instinct that you want to help. Tell me shit, you don't want to see a girl cry. We're all fucking white knights deep down to a level. Even if we fucking resent them and we want to punch them in the nuts, we see a girl crying on the street, we're not going to kick her in the face. We'd be like, oh my god, we got to help her. And I think
ask her why she's crying first.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you probably investigated a bit, but you still think that you should contribute. And I think imagine people who are not jaded at feminism. Imagine people who are not jaded at progressivism. Imagine how they react when they hear the story that women.
Yes. I easily see what you mean.
Yeah.
No. It becomes really easy to sell a story about people attacking people on the internet being cruel simply because of their gender, and especially when you consider that they've been laying this foundation work lots of people get attacked on the internet, the troll laws, the various different. In Britain, for instance, there was someone was petitioning to change the £10 note, which had Darwin on it, to a picture of it was either Mary Nightingale or some other one that I can't remember, some other famous female in British history who's I know is relatively important, but I can't remember the name for the life of me because it was years ago now. And I think the conclusion was that they weren't going to bother, or the notes haven't come around yet. But the point is that she got a lot of hate. And the thing is that when they're discussing it, the important fact is that one of the people who was prosecuted, because apparently Britain has anti-troll laws, yay, was actually a female.
Yeah.
And that never, ever gets mentioned in any of this.
Don't feel bad. Canada is currently having its first trial about disagreeing with feminists on Twitter as criminal harassment.
What's the deal with that? Is there any update on that?
No, the judge will reconvene in October. But
that's right.
The report on it was actually a female journalist, but it's like a classic reel. Like, this girl is classy. She's won awards for journalism, and she's like reporting like she's in bizarro land. She's like, I don't even know why they're prosecuting this guy. You know?
Yeah.
No.
No. All right. So moving it on, the second thing we were going to talk about is the Hugo results. We're
not going to talk about the bomb threat quickly.
Oh, of course. How could I forget the bomb threat? Probably because I was expecting it and I just fell away under. Yeah. Okay. I expected that. Yes. Obviously, the panel ended about 30 minutes before it should have due to a bomb threat. The bomb threat was later proven to be false because, well, the place didn't explode when it should have exploded. So, yeah.
Really spooked the police. They evacuated not just the center, they evacuated completely people who just live in the neighborhood. Like,
yeah, a couple of blocks. And I heard mixed reports. Some say 10 bomb threats, 10 various threats, shootings and bombs. Some say 5. I think the final number worked out to about 3 or 4. And the final one, the one that actually got them evacuated, was a threat to. They sent the threat to the Miami newspaper, and they sent it to the police. Herald, I think. The Miami Herald. And when the Miami Herald checked up with the police, the police felt obligated to help them. To work on the threat assumption that the threat was real.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some interesting point. There was one journalist that was in the audience who actually was surprised on how people just kept the conversation going in a neighboring building. They're like, most people would just run home, and here we are. But to be fair, I don't think it's bravery. I think it's just we know these threats are fake. But he was still impressed that people decided that no, they wish to keep this dialogue going. Fuck the bomb threats.
Yeah, I think he mentioned that, he had been working in Afghanistan, and alright, okay, it's not exactly comparable because
there the bomb threats are real.
Yeah, the bomb threats are real, and they happen. It's not exactly fair or comparable. But he said that in Afghanistan, I imagine there are lots of bomb threats there that aren't real, but obviously because they actually do happen, it's somewhat different. Anyway, the point was, he said he was in Afghanistan, and even if 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't be true, they'd still just go home and hide. And he was impressed based off my experience that this is what people end up sticking around for.
Yeah. Probably pissing Gavin McKinney's up the wazoos. Games are for kids. But anyways.
What is that all about? Like, why? Like, what is your deal? Like, why is that something you feel like?
I could explain it after a lot of talking with people who kind of know him. Milo, this is Milo was hinting to this too. I think he just he probably doesn't like gaming, but the truth is that he's not getting the same attention everyone else does. Like, think what happened. We all love Summer. Kathy Young is popular. We fucking Milo. We'd be gay for Milo. I mean, Ash Cow went from how the fuck is this? Who's this girl? To we kind of like her, right? And here's Gavin, who's busting his balls to be the hardcore conservative, and no one's paying attention to him. Yeah, so he got a little jealous. He got a little jelly, so he wanted attention, but he's a professional asshole, so he only knows how to get attention by being an asshole.
There you go, then.
It's a very simple explanation. Gavin's just being petty. Watch him here. I hope this stream gets to his ears. Gavin, moi je suis un Québécois comme toi, et tu agis comme un maudit tata tabarnak. There we go. He understood what I said.
He said something about shit there. That's all I know.
Gavin is a fellow Quebecer. He knows exactly what I said there.
Yes, I imagine he did. What do you think, Connor? What are your conclusions to SPJ, all things considered?
I think it was useful. I think it was sort of a validation for the hashtag itself, or people, not the hashtag, but people who sort of identify with the hashtag group. I think it sort of served to soothe some flames that were running. I think leading up to it, you could see on Twitter and elsewhere, you could really feel that people were feeling ostracized and they were frustrated. I think this sort of came to light when Koretsky started doing streams, and there was the stupid bullshit between Oliver Campbell and Koretsky, and Campbell fucking smirking.
Campbell's
being his typical self, but I think that was more, and people were sort of you could see it almost happen. People were worried about the movement fragmenting, and I think that was a result of a year's worth of just antagonism and the denial of a specific identity. And I think SPJ really served to soothe those flames, give people new direction, while at the same time it was a climactic point. And an end, I think, to a certain phase. It also birthed new direction. You saw right afterwards saying people posting on KIA and elsewhere, okay, SPJ's over, what do we do now? Well, I mean, immediately people started saying, let's do our own thing. We don't need the validation of other people. We can validate ourselves. And that's sort of, I think, one of the good things that came out of SPJ. I think it also gave a lot of people some hope. And while some of the journalists that were on the panel weren't necessarily, the rock stars of the journalism world, they definitely had some contacts. And I think that being a part of the actual harassment that goes on.
Yeah, they saw it firsthand. They got to see it firsthand.
They sort of saw the narrative, and then they saw reality. And the reality was that there are people who are legitimately concerned about these issues, who don't give two shits about gender or politics or any. They're egalitarians when it comes to all things else considered, except for ethics. And really, that was the motivation. I think that people unbiased to, and not sort of, you saw it with Milo. He sort of I think it was the afternoon. He was in the afternoon panel at the beginning. He sort of acquiesced to the notion that he was no longer an objective journalist, and he was part of GamerGate. He said, let's give it up already. I am. He kept saying they, like GamerGate is. He said, and then he sort of started saying, well, I or we. That's when he was like, I've sort of, this is part of who I am now. And that journalist panel wasn't a part of that, and they got to see firsthand what it's like to experience what it is to be someone who invokes the name GamerGate. And I think that's good, because they will go and they will sort of organically spread that. Or they may not. It doesn't matter.
Lynn Walsh was responding to the whole thing that happened with the shooter, the WBXK, whatever, the whole
right.
She was responding to it. She obviously wants concrete evidence, and it's kind of hard to bring that to her to Twitter, but it's there. They obviously use someone's ironic, sarcastic tweet as a source. She even says, they didn't contact you before using your tweet, and then people more than they didn't contact her, they deleted it when people pointed out that they fell for a sarcastic tweet.
Right. And I think the other thing too, was that these journalists saw that the internet isn't as sort of amorphous and this, quote unquote black hole as it really is. It's full of real people that you can quote, and if there are resources there and people willing to help you if you just make yourself available. And these journalists, I think going into that, they sort of had an idea of what the internet was when it came to reporting anonymous sources, and at least from my perspective, they were given a window through which they could look in and sort of change that view. I think journalism has to evolve, and I think SPJ was sort of
that's what Milo says. Milo said that. He goes you have to evolve. If you can't evolve, find another job. And and I love the because I think Lynn Walsh goes, I'm like something along like I'm pained to see that there's a generation of people out there who think all journalists are bad. I'm going like, no, there are good journalists and bad journalists. And then Milo goes, but that's the problem. To these people, they're not like there's good and bad. They're like, where are the good ones? We don't see them.
Right, where are they? Are they off in, Afghanistan, or are they off in Africa reporting on the actual issues of oppression, or are they just sort of sitting back and like, whatever, I'm not going to fucking touch that. I'm just going to report on sports tonight for the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, and then what happened, and I did see, like, from her, like, it troubled her. Like, she didn't like the idea that there's a group of people out there that see her profession like poop. And it's like, but it has.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing, though. I mean, if you ask any one of those journalists, they know who the giants are in the industry, and the giants are, and I'm not sure that many people in GamerGate know who the giants are in the journalism industry. I do, because journalism is one of my passions. There's Seymour Hersh, James Ryerson, Duncan Campbell, Glenn Greenwald. I have Stone, who's no longer alive, who was a committed socialist, but nonetheless he sort of had the mantra, all governments lie, and his job was to sort of expose government
what you
lies.
said earlier. Bring the news to the people and let the people decide. Bring the information to them.
And these are sort of the giants of journalism. And James Ryerson is probably one of the most visible ones right now because of his court battle with the DOJ and his CIA source during the 2006 Iran nuclear issue. And I think the majority of people they don't know. So those people on the journalist panel, they are sort of like the next generation of possible Hirsches and Rysons and Greenwalds. And I think, and this sort of speaks to the nature of gaming journalism, and I actually wrote a really in-depth article on this. It's got the same issues as mainstream journalism. It's just that not as relevant as people think. I mean, people think, oh, gaming journalism, like, what the fuck is that? And so, and the people who read gaming journalism may not necessarily be exposed to mainstream journalism or the alternatives to mainstream journalism, and so they have this conceptual idea of what a journalist is, and then they have what they actually experience journalists being. And I can tell you right now, the people in gaming journalism, they're not fucking journalists. They're not journalists. They're not journalists by any standard of the word. So, but that's all gamers know, is that sort of like that schema.
But sadly, what reinforces the journalists are corrupt narrative is then you see CNN and MSNBC.
I think that's what Lynn Welsh was saying. Just to wrap this up, is that clearly the major publications trusted gaming publications to report on gamers fairly and honestly. Having listened to this, she said, I can only conclude that that's not the case, and perhaps we were somewhat naive to believe that these people would report on their own audience, with any sense of truth.
Those journalists sort of make, even like Lynn Walsh and Remy, I think was his name.
Yeah.
They sort of, and the black gentleman, I forget his name too. They sort of
David Smart. Yeah. But he's a developer.
They sort of make the mistake of conflating themselves with CNN journalists or journalists of, those aren't journalists, and I think they fall into the trap of perceiving themselves as one and the same because the public does that. And I think that's one of the things. You have to have enough self-awareness to understand that, no, you are separate. You're a journalist. The people that you see on the media, except for Derek Smart, they're not journalists. They're I don't even know what to say. They're entertainment advocates.
Exactly, but the thing is, to the gamer's perspective, when you see the real journalists falling to the same trap, you start thinking that even they're corrupt. And let's be fair, there are some real journalists. This is instant information, but I know someone who basically did not have their story on the CBC, and they used Brianna Wu instead of them. Because Brianna Wu
name names, everyone knows.
No, just in case, just in case. You're actually talking to a guy that Homeland Security would like, because I don't do what the NSA does. Anyways, and basically they didn't want to use her story because it did not fit the narrative the CBC wanted. So you literally have the Canadian Broadcaster Association, the Canadian source of Canadian news, saying, this is the narrative you want, you don't fit it. I mean, what are you, a propaganda agency?
Yeah, and I think for the most part the journalist panel saw that, and I think they'll take that with them. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from SPJ, is that they saw the narrative, they knew what it was, I'm sure they were familiar with it, and then they got to saw the narrative sort of crumble, and they got to experience what the actual narrative is. And so they're gonna take that with them, and they're going to remember that. Now, they might not specifically cover GamerGate ever again, or games journalism, but they're going to remember that time in Miami when they were on a panel talking about ethics in journalism and someone called a bomb threat. That's going to stick with them. And I think that's good. You know, not that they got called, that a bomb threat got called on them, but that they're going to have something very memorable to keep in the back of their, right in the back of their head, that screams out ethics in journalism. Is what I'm doing ethical? And I think that's the takeaway, because they're going to spread that around. They're going to be the role models now for other people, and I think that's important.
No, I think that's a good conclusion to that. So the second topic of the night is, and it's the first in our title, is the Hugo results. Just to give a quick brief overview, the Hugos are part of the Worldcon conference on sci-fi and fantasy, which is perhaps the oldest award ceremony in the fandom, is what it's called. And basically it's been the subject of long-running, about 3 years now, controversy surrounding who gets to get the votes, essentially. Who wins the titles, who gets what, and why are they getting it. And the ultimate conclusion that some people, such as the Sad Puppies and an affiliated but not the same group, the Rabid Puppies, was that it was basically politics was the watchword of the day, rather than quality of the work and the enjoyability of the work.
Yeah. So pushing a political ideology and fitting some diversity quota or something. Yeah.
Ironically, the diversity quota being very undiverse.
Oddly enough, the writers themselves are, and the story has to be, and I don't want to be mean, but you could write a story of your transgendered character discovering the challenge of being transgendered in a sci-fi setting, but you're not what people would call science fiction. You could use the science fiction.
That would be some of the similar arguments. Is that if you're just set in, is a question of whether if it's a matter of setting or if there are specific tropes or basically how do you define a sci-fi? What is sci-fi, and can you qualify stuff like that?
That example I gave before would be a personal drama in a sci-fi setting. Now, should a book like that, if well written, not be nominated for the Hugo? Definitely it should be if it's well written. But it comes a point where you're going like, if these are the only stories they want, it's like science fiction, at least in its purest form, is you could have this as a backstory or a secondary or tertiary plot. I actually studied creative writing. But the thing is that if this is the A plot, you're not really sci-fi. And there's nothing wrong in doing that, but this doesn't mean the other books that are actual sci-fi, if they don't meet some gender quota, like, so all the heroes are male Marines in a futuristic space setting, and you're like, I'm sorry, it's still a valid story if it's well written, especially if the primary plot explores themes that sci-fi tends to do, which is usually, I think I have a friend who describes it as, in sci-fi, generally it's impact. Like you'd say, let's say you have warp travel. How does traveling faster than light change?
It's an extended Socratic exercise.
Exactly, and then usually in the backdrop, you explore a theme that is prevalent in the modern civilization. And so you use the classic Star Trek example. You explore racism with the white-black Obviously, that's goofy, but generally speaking, is you use the how does society change, and then maybe explore a pressing or contemporary issue under this lens. And since you're not connected to reality, you could be much more avant-garde. Deep Space Nine, good example. It's the Middle East. Deep Space Nine is the Middle East, but because you're not having the Muslims and the Americans and then the Russians and whatever, you were able to get deeper into the story, and it was easier to be sympathetic or expose elements of the story without it incurring emotional responses because it's not connected to shit we have to deal with in real life.
Yes, this is the case of it. Now, basically, the reason we're talking about this is that the Hugo Awards finished up basically a couple of weeks ago, and the results basically had I'm using basically a lot. The results were that many of the works that were slated, slate being basically a recommendation of 5 works by a group, though you were encouraged not to just choose what you want, but here's the best. Here's what we think are the best. You might like them, you might not. Just choose what you want. Is that many of these slated works, which by themselves probably would have done quite well, maybe even winning awards, were all no awarded. I think the end result was almost all of the awards were no awarded, and to put the cherry on top of a shit cake, they actually invented an entirely new award on the sly with no warning called the asterisks, and then basically just handed those out saying, yeah, you won this asterisk and this one and this one and this one, so that they could no award all of that and still give out awards for the good boys and girls. And one of the more interesting aspects of it is that it's actually caused some disappointment. Like, actually, I'll pull it up now. Is that the one of the men behind the campaign this year, Corialla, basically said, you haven't won. All you've done is handed over so many puppies and neutrals over to Vox Day, because he predicted that you would do this, and you did it. You even celebrated it. So they no longer wish to save it. There's no saving this now from some people, or from a lot of people's perspectives. It's either we kill it ourselves or we let it continue in this fashion. But the concept of trying to save it so that it's more fair, that concept has died out to a lot of people.
Yeah, because you're right. What happened with the voting, it was showing that the politically infused element of the Hugo rather burned the castle than reform.
No. Indeed, he even says that they gave out as many no awards this time in this one awards show as they had in the entire history of the awards.
And there's other things someone pointed out. They're saying, like, let's say the SJW side of this go, like, yeah, but Sad Puppies organized voting blocks to ensure their people are chosen as nominees, reinforcing the old patriarchy that we're trying to get rid, blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing. If that is true, and they're wrong because more people enjoy your bizarre stories, then why didn't you get those people to vote and nominate the stories you thought were good? I'm sorry, but the easiest way to defeat the Sad Puppies is that the Sad Puppies were wrong. And then they could go into a voting block to put their guys in, but you could get your people to vote your guys in, and because there's more of you than them, your nominees would have made it through. The fact they didn't make it through means, I'm sorry, no one likes your piece of shit. I'm not going to mince my words here. No one likes your crap. This is why Sad Puppy could succeed. No one voted for your crap.
Indeed, and basically the conclusion is that no, next time this comes around, they're going to be doing absolutely everything in their welcome back. They're going to be doing absolutely everything in their powers to ensure that the wrong fans cannot get in. They're doing everything in their power to eliminate vote slating, and they're doing everything in their power to ensure that there are enough loopholes that they can just veto, wrong works.
So here's my here's my sort of outside take on something that I have really no clue about. I've just started, learning about it through you guys, actually. I watched the Hugo Awards, and I watched everybody complaining, and my thought immediately was, why do you care? Go make your own award show. I mean,
why
Vox
do we?
is,
Okay.
Vox is,
I can
and
answer your question easily. Sorry.
Not the why do you care,
Oh.
because of the ethical issues or sort of the unfairness of it. Why do you care about this specific award show that obviously isn't upholding what it was originally supposed to do? Create your own.
I can answer. Simple psychology. The Hugo Awards were prestigious once upon a time, and you're right, they have failed. So why fuck? But the prestige, yeah, and because of that prestige, it's people don't want to give it up. I mean, but it's this way. I could give you a spaceship. We could go to another planet. We could abandon Earth, leave the feminists and the SJWs have the Earth. We're going to go to this glorious planet with blue space babes. Are you in?
Yeah, actually.
There you go. Some people are not comfortable with that.
Come back home.
Yeah. I only have enough fuel for one trip.
Yeah, actually.
I'm not sure I would do it.
That's fine. You have the right to have that opinion.
Sure.
But the thing is a lot of people would be like, man, I think we should fight for the Earth, instead of go fucking blue space babes.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not saying don't. So I guess what I'm not saying is don't not fight for, in this case, the Earth or the Hugo Awards. But it's quite obvious that those puppies, they're both rabid and sick, or sad, not sick.
Sad.
Are not welcome at the Hugo Awards, and it's even more obvious that they've actually got a very large following. There are people willing to go. I guarantee you, if Vox put up a blog post that said we're creating our own award, people would be all behind it. They'd pay to go, and they could start what the Hugo Award used to be on. They could call it what the Vox Pop Award. I don't fucking know, something like that. Or the Vox Award, something like that.
Vox is well aware of his standing within the overall community, and
well, sure, but you get my point though. There are certainly enough people who agree that at least, even though Vox Day is sort of infamous within the community, I think the community as a whole agrees that just because we don't disagree or we don't agree with what Vox's political leanings are or why his rhetoric that comes through his writing, that's not a reason to deny the quality of his content.
If it's good, like I said, a well-written story of a trans character would be fine. If it's a well-written science fiction story that explores the themes of science fiction, you could have your the political correct, social justice-y, progressive character in a sci-fi story, not just a sci-fi setting,
Right, and so instead of sort of grappling with something that seems to be a sinking ship, just build a new ship that does what you want it to do, that still sails the right way and stops at every port.
I think it's important to remember that saving the Hugos was only ever part of the point of sad puppies and rabbit puppies.
I was about to say rabbit puppies. You're agreeing with them now, Connor, because the rabbit puppies were the ones saying the ship has
burn it down.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's so right. So now that Vox Day and the rabbit puppies have sort of done what they set out to do, why don't, instead of focusing on it, we all know that it's a shit award now that's specifically tailored to one group. Go make your own. There'll be in the marketplace of ideas. It seems like your initiative, if you start one for a fair award, will be widely popular.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I think what happened now was important because
certainly, yeah,
because it proves this point you're making. Until this point, people were like, maybe we can save, maybe they're not desperate, maybe they're going to back off, maybe they're going to run away, maybe they're going to let us take back. But now we're like, no, these guys are in the castle and they have a torch saying, if we can't have it, you can't. And now that we know this,
no, I'm not saying that what happened shouldn't have happened. What I'm saying is going forward,
Yeah.
I believe they're still trying to work out where to go from here.
Obviously.
Generally, these are year-long campaigns planned out over the course of the year. So,
yeah.
I forget who it was that I saw say it. I think it might have been Vox Day, actually. Saying that I'm in it for the long haul. 10 years or more.
Vox Day does believe he's in a battle with. On the side of righteousness against the forces of chaos, anarchy, and just plain old.
Dude, why are you saying this is a hyperbolic? He is. What are you talking about, you crazy mofo? Let's continue.
no. But the point is to underline that this is his own police aside. This is a man who is quite willing to go the distance.
Yeah, this is his fight. He picked this as his fight.
Yeah,
sure. This is sort of his defining identity, and I get that. I understand. But at some point, you have to say, are you more committed to your own theology, your own pride, or are you more committed to sort of the health of your industry? He obviously writes, and he cares about the industry that he's in. So I don't know. It's something to say what someone is going to do with their own. Their own.
Call it the Venus Awards, and it should be a giant phallic symbol.
Yeah. See, there you go. There you go. And what will start off as sort of a poke and prod at the ridiculousness of the Hugos could end up being actually the Hugos without all the bullshit, 15 years from now, 20 years from now.
Yeah. I suppose it generally depends on what he wants to do. I suspect... it's hard to tell.
Maybe he just wants to be a shitlord and just fuck with them, and that's cool too. But whatever.
Yeah, I suspect there is an element of.
You need someone to keep the SJWs distracted. If he wants to be that flair, I'm okay with that.
I suspect he wants to be that shitlord. It's just how he is. More formally, there is actually something relatively interesting. Is that there's this series coming out saying how to kill Vox Day, and it's not basically how to murder him and get away with it. It's
how to stomp
how
out
to kill Ford, and it's got relevance to straight up Gamergate as well as just sad puppies.
Can you shoot the link in the?
Oh, of course, I'll send you the link to the conclusions. All of the stuff is.
The Rev 3. All right.
Yeah, I'll just send the link. The links will also be put in the description at the end.
Okay.
The point that blog makes is that we're going through what might be called fourth generation war, which is this concept of a stateless war. A comparison might be made between what we're doing now and what is happening in ISIS.
Yeah.
Is that you've got forces that are looking just to destroy the state, and if you consider the state to be the standard publishing overarchy, and us to be the ragtag rebels, then we're looking.
I don't think we want to go around bashing in metaphorically statues and pissing things on fire.
For example.
Yeah, because we want something. I'm not talking about the murdering part. I'm just talking about we actually want things that are free, open. Individuals have the right, and we actually want a good games journalism industry. We want good games. We're not trying to shitify human civilization.
Obviously.
At least in our microphone.
The comparison is not perfect. Comparisons rarely are, but the point of it is that Vox Day is in the interest of destroying this, and that's who it's specifically targeted at. He wants to destroy the Hugos. He wants to hear the lamentation of their women, essentially. And the point of it is that this sets out a rather realistic plan on how to remove it, and it's somewhat related to David Orbach's masterpiece of How to Kill Gamergate, in that you've got to concede that you are at least wrong to some level, that you may have done something wrong at some point, that you've got to consider that you've got to take less offense. Basically, you've got to attain the moral high ground. You've got to engage the enemy, and you've just generally got to not be an SJW in order to end this, because you can't win if you permaban him from the conference. That makes him a martyr of free speech. If you start throwing shit at him, then he just rolls off his back and becomes more evidence of the political game that is happening. Ultimately, you have to be above him. You have to attain the moral high ground, and one of the other ways to win is to split him from Sad Puppies, because Sad Puppies has gone on record saying, the people who are behind it anyway, have said, we're not comfortable with Vox Day, but at least Vox Day is honest about why he's here, and he's, if it's a choice between the guys shooting at me, saying we're all this, this, and this, and the guys who aren't shooting at us right now, who do you think we're going to choose?
Yeah.
I mean all of this rhetorically, but metaphorically, but the point is still there. If you understand. So ultimately, I found that the Hugo Awards to be impressive in that they managed to convince people that Vox Day was right. Something very difficult considering he's a hardcore Christian of the old school kind. Is not a white supremacist, but he does believe strongly in self-segregation and various racial stuff that makes people very uncomfortable, and it does actually hold some, and is actually, well, I wouldn't say misogynist, but he does hold views that will sound misogynist, because he, I'm not sure if you can be misogynist based off data, but...
yeah.
But that's just how it is. Anyway, the point is that Vox Day is basically won this engagement. Whether or not he continues to win is all up to the people running the conference, but from the way they've handled this part of it, they fail to see the fact that they are at least half involved in this, if not more so. Anyway, so the final part of tonight is a discussion on the etymology and the understanding of the word Cucksurvitive. Gillis, you're falling more and more into the right-wing influence.
Yeah.
Would you care to give us a brief overview?
Sure. All right. Well, Cucksurvitives is a term used by several conservatives to single out a subgroup of conservatives. And specifically, I think the best way to describe it is conservatives who use the same tools as social justice warriors. And what I mean by this is, like, let's say on the conservative sphere of things, there's a lot of, like, there's going to be people who believe in religion, but they're not all. Like, there are atheist conservatives, but it's generally people who have a appreciation of tradition, economic freedom, and by economic freedom basically means someone's rich, someone's poor, accept it, and this kind of stuff. And obviously they tend to be, but the tradition, the sort of like talking points they usually pick up is things like immigration regulation, assimilation instead of multiculturalism. And things like this. So a Cucksurvitive is one who would be a conservative who's, like, for some reason wants to play the SJW shame game. So he'd quickly call out another conservative for being racist. So let's say, I'll use a relevant example. Donald Trump says, I'm going to build a fucking wall between Mexico and the United States. So a Cucksurvitive would be like, that's racist, but you'd expect that from an SJW, not from a fellow conservative. So Cucksurvitives was a term used that these conservatives are trying to play playing the shame game, and fuck you. I discussed this with you a few days ago,
yes.
And you kind of said it, like they use the tactics, but not to understand it to better defeat it, but just they use the tactics and almost like accepting its tenets in a weird way,
Yeah.
Like, it's racist to basically say, let's kick out the illegals, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, you're a conservative. That it seems uncomfortable, but you're the one who speaks about assimilation is better than multiculturalism, that slow and regulated immigration is better than open borders. Then you can't call someone who actually advocates that racist.
Yes, I think it's from me, from what I've read, is that a conservative could briefly be described as someone who is basically they're trying to broaden their party out to voters that, traditionally speaking, the right wing in America and the right wing in general, because it's the same over here in Britain, generally doesn't do well with. Like somewhat the working class, minorities such as the black and the Asians and the, well, so I suppose in America that'd be the Latin, but I suppose in here it would be like Poland and so on and so forth. Parties that, traditionally speaking, the right wing doesn't tend to do very well with, and they're trying to broaden their appeal there because they're not doing well, and ultimately, if things keep going the way they are, the right in America will never get into power again unless they can make some change.
And however, if I could interject here, and this is where probably conservative comes in. Actually, if people are curious about the etymology, I think the concept of the word is that you're letting the left fuck your right-wing buddies, and you're just watching. But so cuck. Anyways, but the thing is, you're right. The right needs to change. But however, some people would argue that what's causing the right to lose power is not that they're too conservative, and obviously you can be too conservative, like, I love baby Jesus, all of you atheists die, then yeah, you're probably going overboard at that point. No, but what I mean by saying the conservatives can't be too conservative is in the sense that they point out that there are people who vote for conservative power blocks, but what happens is that these people are choosing not to vote because they're feeling the conservatives are becoming too liberal. And then obviously the ones who are liberal are not going to vote conservatives even if they sound like liberals. Yeah. So of course they're losing influence, not because they're being too right, on the right side I mean, is that they're trying to be like the left. So they alienate the right, and obviously not going to win the left over.
This is to become more left.
Yeah, and the problem with that is, well, you're not going to recruit the left. The left is already has their people, Mm-hmm. It's like, you're going to out-left the left?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you're not. Then you're not right. You're not going to get votes. So you're hoping to steal the votes from the left to become the new left? Yeah. I mean, I guess I could see their plan if the old left parties are crap and you become the new left, but. Yeah, but then it basically makes people going like, well, yeah, but guess what? You're not winning because you're getting the conservative votes back, Because the question is there a conservative vote out there? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, these people are basically going like, we've got to be more left-wing because apparently they think everyone's left-wing.
And it's no doubt the Overton window has shifted to the left, but I don't think it's... Well, the fact that I'm currently living under a Tory government suggests that it hasn't shifted quite so far to the left as people imagine.
And people wouldn't be cheering Donald Trump when he says his almost racist comments if, as you said, like, if the window has shifted that much, you wouldn't have a Tory government. We wouldn't have had a Tory government. And though the polls are kind of sketchy now in Canada about that, no one knows what the election is going to be next month. 2 months from now, next month, a month and a half from now. And in the case of America, Trump is gaining popularity day by day. So obviously the window hasn't shifted that much, No.
Yes, and I think it's worth pointing that out. It's a good segue into Trump, because Trump illustrates another element of this conservatism, is that it's often can be considered derogatory towards the leadership of the GOP and the right in America, because a lot of the grassroots feel like they're being betrayed.
Yeah.
On the ground level, they're like, why aren't you saying stuff that I care about? Why are you just, why are you agreeing with everything the left says? Where is my representation? And, despite that, they still continue to vote for them because it's a two-party system and you're screwed if you vote for anyone else. But ultimately, that's the point, is that they're going to that, and that's part of the conservative movement, and that's kind of why Donald Trump is gaining such popularity. It's because people don't trust don't trust politicians. They don't trust the GOP leadership anymore. So a rich outsider who cannot be bought and who is just saying what he thinks is really, really appealing, despite the fact that he's completely, completely the worst choice.
Yeah, it's the joke is you trust the self-made crook you know is a crook, as opposed to the guy who comes to you saying, I'm not a crook, and you know he is.
Yeah.
Oh. I want to know what Connor's, Connor hasn't spoken for a bit.
So it's interesting. I actually talk about this a lot with some of my family members. This movement, this Cucksurvitive movement, and both the movement of Cucksurvitives themselves and people who are sort of calling them out, fascinates me. I wasn't familiar with the term, and actually, I am admittedly sort of in, I don't know, I'm sort of in a transition right now between an anarchist and I don't even know what, a political nihilist. But I typically, you could probably describe me as sort of left-leaning, progressive, but a staunch Second and First Amendment supporter, rights supporter.
So you see yourself as a left-wing cultural libertarian?
Probably, most likely, yeah.
Probably most likely.
And so the fascinating part is sort of not by my own choice, but by the people that I traditionally identified with, forcing me into a group, an identity that I don't identify with, namely the natural conservative far-right camp. And the only sort of thing, the only connection there is sort of the really staunch defense and understanding of the importance of the ability to speak freely without fear of sort of any public shaming or repercussions when we're talking about socially traditional, off-color, taboo topics. It's sort of the, I guess you could sum it up best by saying, being able to call someone a racial slur also affords someone who doesn't agree with that speech being able to call that person an asshole.
Obviously.
Right, and so that's the trade-off. But when you sort of start to limit one in favor of the other, then you no longer exist in sort of a free speech, intellectually free society. And so that's sort of where I found myself. And then I ran into this term Cucksurvitive, and I started looking at it, and you sort of, though the Federalist has sort of shifted a little bit left, not very much, you sort of get these sites like The Right Stuff, and you listen to their, the Daily Show, and read some of their articles, and you see what's going on. And for the most part, the support of Trump, I don't think people really give a shit about Trump. The people on the right, the natural conservative side, they see what Trump is for what, they see him for what he is, but they're so enamored with the fact that radical, retarded liberals are getting their panties in a bunch and their heads are exploding by people sort of just throwing political correctness out the window. It drives them up a wall. And these people who are supporting Trump, they love it. And it's great.
He's literally a troll. This is literally what would happen.
Exactly.
Using old political speak, Trump is a populist.
Yes.
He is the right version of populism.
This is an internet troll playing for president who has enough money to make it a serious contention.
Right. And you see what's going on, and so I saw this and I became fascinated with it, and the notion of Cucksurvitive itself sort of
I think
cracked me up.
To use the concept, I think you said freedom of speech. A person has the right to say something slightly offensive, and just as much the other person has the right to say, yo, I think that's crap. And then ironically, it works
and then
both.
Here's why.
It works 3 ways. Like, here's why. But here's the thing, it works 3 ways. That's what something I explained to people. Freedom of speech is not 2-way, but 3-way. Because the third way is a third person or the first person could come back saying, look, I think you misunderstood my point, and this is why.
Right.
You know, like it says, I say something like, let's kick out the illegals. You go, well, you know, that's racist because, you know, illegals and stuff and culture. And you'd be like, oh, listen, look, they're not legal citizen. A country has the right to defend its borders. Look, it's not a question of race. It's not a question of nationalism.
Right.
It's a question of, like, economics, okay? We are not the breadbasket of everyone who just wants to come over. So, you know, you accusing me of racism is wrong. So it's 3-way. It's, you can make the comment, the other person could say that blah blah, and then you could say, assuming you don't back off, that, well, no, I think your accusation is wrong. And in a way, Cucksurvitive is the third response. It's a little shady.
Right.
So I'm not a huge fan of the term Cucksurvitive, because it's not you just telling these people, like, look, you're calling me a racist because you're a retard. That would actually be a little more honest. Now they decide to use sort of like a labeling, ironically. So they're being Cucksurvitives by using the term Cucksurvitive, ironically. But as far as I can understand about human interactions, it makes sense. It's probably this built-up frustration that you're having your political peers shaming you. So it's a pity that their response is to shame back. But it's an understandable, just not an intellectually enlightened response to that.
Well, yeah, certainly, and I think at some point we have to sort of admit that, you know, a very small percentage of the population is intellectually sound and consistent, and we all are sort of animals. You know, I think the left sort of likes to look at people as being, you know, separate, sort of working in tandem with, but ultimately separate from nature. And I think sort of the Cucksurvitive movement highlights this best, because when you see a Republican, quote unquote, cucking, and they get called out on it, the immediate response is to sort of descend into rhetorical just tribalism and animalism. Leftists come to their defense, and it becomes this sort of tribal. It's a descent into sort of just a pissing match, you know, the modern version of tribal warfare, and it was precipitated by a single comment, like a one-word phrase, and if that's not indicative of how animalistic we are, then I don't know the fuck is. If you can get your panties in a bunch by something like that, I mean, it's a.
I think it showcases more that there was this tension already. I suspect.
Well, sure, yeah.
Less so that we're all animals. I suspect that's an element of it. But I don't think it would have had the exact same effect had these previous tensions that had gone unsaid not been there.
Basically, I think there's a 3-way split in the right. I mean, keep in mind, this is from an outsider Canadian perspective, but I am a right-wing Canadian, though, which basically makes me centrist in American politics. The thing is that I think the 3-way pole is you have the libertarian pole, like basically a lot of social freedom, small government, but, you know, basically this sort of non-interventionist to pacifist. Then you have the neocons, which are like America, and they reenact the movie from, you know, they reenact the movie as a fantasy. And then you have the moderates. And I think the Cucksurvitives are not the moderates, but I think like a part of the moderates, some of them like want to stick to the original conservative values, and then you have the moderates who felt like they had to be more, air quote, left-leaning liberal. And I think this created like a fourth pole in the party, and then the Cucksurvitive is the final explosion where the neocons, the libertarians, and the more conservative moderates finally kind of just got fed up, you know.
Got fed up and just started hacking at each other.
Hacking at each other and basically calling out the fourth faction on what they thought it was, you know.
It'll be interesting to see where this term goes. You know, it's still very much an underground term. It hasn't gotten popular usage. It's very much specific to natural far-right conservative camps. Certainly, some of the more active internet leftists are aware of the term. But for them, so I speak, speaking to my own father, who's very far-right conservative, almost frustratingly hardline libertarian, that he had no idea what the term was, and so it's very much so still an underground term. I think not many people have been exposed to it, but I think what you will see, I'm hoping that Trump does use the term. That would be awesome, and I would fucking love to see the liberals' heads explode. Because if anything pisses me off more, it's cognitive dissonance, and contradictory positions, and the liberal camp is full of them, which is, I sort of find myself in purgatory. I'm in political purgatory. So I don't agree with the basic tenets of conservatism as it's known today, but I also don't agree with the entire leftist party. So I'm sort of like, what in the fuck?
See, I'm lucky. Canadian conservatives are more like American centrists, so the Canadian tenets of conservatism I can agree with, because it's not obviously as extreme as American conservatism.
Well, see, that's the thing, though, is I don't know that there's really a true centrist camp in the United States. People like to say that they're centrist, but when you actually get down into the muck and you sort of start to flesh out people's political ideologies, they immediately sort of gravitate to one polar extreme or the other. Now, maybe if you were to able to sort of take a third-party, invisible, objective view, yeah, sure, certainly people would be centrist in their homes. But when it comes to American politics and you start to talk about politics, there is no middle ground. You're either here or you're opposite of whatever that here is.
Yeah, you're right. It's just saying, but in Canada, the line that separates the two is more to the left, though.
Right. So, and I don't know if that's indicative of your culture. I have, you Canadians, you're like strangely Twilight Zone-y friendly. You're so friendly that it's almost.
Oh, there's a joke. I'll keep it short. Basically, Canadians are what jokingly people call conservative socialists, and you're like, well, wait, that's a contradiction. It goes like, welcome to Canada. You know?
Exactly. But I that's one of the things. You look at sort of Canadian politics, and I think you see it. Whereas here, it's very cutthroat. I mean, sort of one of the jokes, a Canadian will apologize for apologizing, that sort of thing. And you don't have that here, and it's sad. But at the same time, it'll be interesting to see where this term conservative goes, and I look forward to seeing. I mean, I keep saying that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump should run on a ticket together, because that would totally throw a wrench in the
Gee, man, didn't I say this today?
Yes.
It would be the perfect one. The socialist and the capitalist, the epic battle for America's
they're both capitalists. They're both capitalists.
Yeah, obviously.
Bernie Sanders.
I'm talking about their PR. But I'm talking about their PR.
Yeah, their PR. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. But so that would throw the entire political system in the United States in the toilet. I mean, people would literally shit bricks. They would not know what to do, and I think
it'd be hilarious.
Actually, I think it would be really good. It would be extremely funny to watch the pundits on TV just lose their shit. I mean, you get everybody looking like Karl Rove after Obama won in 2008. Like, holy shit, what the fuck do we do now? Like, what are we gonna do? But I think at the same time, it would be sort of tantamount to the Bull Moose Party, where Teddy Roosevelt won running independent. And I think I have no illusions. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be really interesting and awesome to see it happen, because I think it would do a lot of good. I think that Trump and Sanders are so polar opposites, they would just equal each other out. And what they would do is they would pull the moderates, because the moderates in the United States are these people who are tired of the PC bullshit on both sides. and they comprise the majority of this country.
Well,
it would
but by the way,
both
Trump,
of them.
but Trump does appeal to that. But obviously, the true moderates are not as crazy as Trump. But they do agree with the anti-PC stuff. Yeah.
Well, right, and I think that's sort of, people look at Trump and who are not Republicans, but they definitely don't want to vote for fucking Hillary Clinton, or Joe Biden, who is not even in the fucking race, and people are talking about him over Bernie Sanders, and they're like, what the fuck, like. And and they look at Bernie Sanders and they're sort of skeptical because they don't know. I mean, he's this old guy. He's got a really good history with civil rights, but he's got these ties to Israel and Saudi Arabia, and they're sort of skeptical. And they look at Donald Trump and they're like, man, he's a raving buffoon. What do I do? And then
it is safe to say he is a lunatic. He's
right. He is a total nutcase. But then you get these people who are sort of stuck in this political purgatory like I am. I think most of the country is.
Like, what's the joke? The Washington Party? There's no Democrat, there's no Republican. It's just the Washington
Party. It's
Party.
Sort of the good old boys club, and everybody's a part of it, and they're all working towards the same goal. Yeah, you get Trump and Bernie Sanders together, and people would be like, "Holy shit! Like, this is crazy enough. This might work. Fuck it, I'm gonna vote for it because this is real history." Fuck the bullshit of electing a black guy to
just vote for it because you're like, fuck it. Fuck it. There's no point to voting for anyone else.
I do have a slight bias for Trump, though, because I want to see Trump in G7 meetings or discussing shit with Putin. Like, I don't know why. I want to see that. I want to see, like, Donald Trump taking a flight to fucking Geneva or wherever, Minsk, and meeting with Putin and see if he keeps the...
So this is the thing, though, is I think that would actually be... I don't think it would be as I don't think there would be as much conflict there as maybe one might seem, because
no, I don't think there will be conflict, but I want to see his personality.
I think they would get along fine, and actually, I think we would see some real progress. To be honest with you,
true. I see. Yeah, go. Yeah, I do agree.
You look at Putin, and he's just a politician the same way, but. You can't imagine. I mean, maybe he does. Maybe he is a fucking sycophant, a psychopath, but and a sociopath, and he does want another fucking Cold War. But let's just sort of give him the benefit of the doubt. All the shit that he's doing, he's doing it because he has to, or he feels like he can. The shit with Crimea and Ukraine. Why wouldn't he do that? What impetus is there for him not to do that? So I guess my point is that. If there were a legitimate threat of nuclear war or political suicide or economic recession for Russia, I don't think Putin would do it. Now, there's a very large state system in Russia that has a lot of propaganda. So you have to take that into account. But I think legitimately, Putin is sort of an atypical type A person who just sees President Obama as sort of like this bitch. Why is he even going to deal with him? Like, why the fuck do I want to talk to this guy?
When I talk to Eastern Europeans, what they basically point out is this: why they hate America now. Like, Hungary is developing a very massive anti-America sentiment because Obama is, like you said, looks like a giant cunt. But on the other hand, they feel like he's doing things that are trying to provoke Russia. I'm not saying Russia's not provoking America, but they're going like, so you have a guy who's diplomatically wimpy, but militaristically, what's called inciting.
He's a hawk.
Yeah, he's a hawk. And you're kind of going like, and they're going like, okay, I'm sorry, but this is like a brew recipe for war. They're like, is Obama trying to trigger World War III? And seriously, like at this point, currently, Obama ranks lower than Stalin and Hitler.
I'd have to see the polls on that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that's hard. This is from Hungary. This is from a Hungarian I'm talking. So trying to get. Yeah.
I thought you were saying from a war perspective, and that would be fucking phenomenal. Like, what the fuck? Why haven't I heard about this? But from perspective of Hungary, that's interesting.
Yeah, a Hungarian is like they really don't like Obama. They hate him. They blame him for the migrant crisis in the EU. They blame him for literally. It's like I was surprised when I was talking to my Hungarian uncle that Obama in Hungary is so reviled.
Yeah.
Other than keep in mind, the Hungarian president is a fascist pseudo dictator. So let's not mince words here. Though he's not the fascist party. Hungary actually does have a fascist party, but I'll call a fascist when I see one, even if he's not officially the fascist party. And the president of Hungary is a fascist, above the rule of law kind of stuff and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's also a sort of an element of globalization that you have to take into account here. And so Bernie Sanders is probably, for the most part, anti-globalization, anti-neoliberalism.
And that's interesting for a Democrat, or at least a guy who basically goes with the PR that he's a socialist, because usually most people who PR as socialist or as I said, or left-wing Democrat tend to be very pro-globalists.
Well, so socially global, but economically no, because so globalization and transnational corporations, the typical. So you get these. They're typically personified by institutions like the World Bank or the IMF, and the main tool in their toolbox are what are called SAPs, or structuralized adjustment programs, which basically come in and privatize entire countries' natural resources that they, in exchange for, and austerity measures in exchange for basically giant loans. So basically Greece, and socialists are typically against that, and so, but.
Yeah, but I mean social. I'm talking about the people like if you look at Hillary Clinton wants to suck off the IMF stick.
Right, she's not a socialist. She's not a Democrat.
Yes,
she's a neocon.
That's part of her PR.
She's probably the U.S.'s version of Thatcher.
No, Thatcher was Thatcher. Well, that's right, because Thatcher was honest, right? But Thatcher was honest, right?
Yeah, Thatcher was honest. Everyone knew she was going to fuck the miners.
Well, right, but see, that's the thing, is that if you were Margaret Thatcher, you couldn't get elected to the Democratic ticket, and so Hillary Clinton might. That's why I think it's insidious. That's why I think sort of democratic neoconservatism isn't so insidious, is because people aren't overtly neocons. So Hillary Clinton isn't overtly a neocon, but her voting record, her policies, her rhetoric indicates otherwise, that she actually is one. And she's very politically neutral for the reason that the Overton window shifts, and as it shifts, she sits right in the middle of it.
Basically, the best way to say the only thing that's common about her is that she's a authoritarian bitch.
Yeah. I'd say that's accurate. And
left right doesn't matter. Left right doesn't matter to her. It's all about
So you sort of so getting back to Cucksurvitism, you sort of see Donald Trump is sort of personifying the vanguard of calling out Cucksurvitives, and then you see Bernie Sanders he's sort of the left version of Trump, and calling out.
Yeah, and perhaps
he calls out
to
Democrats.
the same extreme, but
I don't know what you would call a Democratic politician who a Democratic version of a cuck, but I mean Bernie Sanders.
Oh no, that's easy. It's an SJW. It's their version. It's the insane vestige that has somehow managed to take over the entirety or a good majority of the party, and yet doesn't represent the majority of people.
I have a question for you, Connor.
Yes.
Obviously, Hillary's presenting herself as the air quote progressive candidate, but which of the candidates you think is the? And when I'm talking about progressive, I'm talking about the far left. I'm talking about like the things that spawn SJWs, right?
I thought you were gonna. So I said
progressive.
Because that's who I would say is the true progressive, but the person who spawned the SJW.
Okay, it's the term progressive. Okay, so you at least know, because I come from a more right-wing background, the term progressive is always bad. I mean, back in the 20s, it was the abolitionists were progressives. Progressive is basically newspeak. When I hear someone use the term progressive, they're using newspeak, and that fires off Orwellian bells in my mind. I know when you said it, I know how you meant it, so don't worry. I didn't think you were some kind of Orwellian asshole. Don't worry. But when I hear normal politicians use the term progressivism, it's newspeak. It's newspeak to my ears.
Yeah, sure.
And so I'll give you an example of progressives, the Young Turks, and the way I'm using the word progressive.
Yeah, I can't even pronounce his name, but they would fit that. But so you're asking me who I think in the party, the Progressive Party?
Yeah, air brackets progressive. Yeah, newspeak progressive. Yeah.
Invent or sort of is an
Who's
SJW?
the most social? Yeah. Which candidate is the most social justice warrior-y?
Well, it's definitely not Hillary, and
obviously.
I don't think it's Bernie.
Yeah, Hillary's just claiming that she is for the votes. But she's not. Obviously, she's a bitch.
I don't know that there is one.
And one that is honestly an SJW as opposed to using.
That's the thing, though. Is to be honestly an SJW and Washington politics would be to make yourself unelectable.
Yeah, that's part of the point of it. Is that if you're open,
but it's kind of funny. But it's kind of funny because you said Hillary is not a social justice warrior, but the PR she uses at least does pass her off as the SJW candidate, because every fucking feminist I know and all like, Hillary, we're ready for Hillary.
Well, but that I think that's less because they sort of see her as being a social, quote unquote, social justice warrior or social justice progressive, and more because they're just identifying with the fact that she's a woman.
Yeah, which is something very air quote progressive to do.
Well, sure, right, yes. So that's sort of the irony here is that, they sort of fall into the trap of their own ideology. But yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I don't think there really is one on, because you wouldn't be electable.
So, is there any candidate you think would be a cultural Marxist?
No.
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 Yeah, okay, that's actually good news for your country. You don't have a cultural Marxist as an official candidate yet.
There are definitely people in the political sphere that are cultural Marxists. None of them that I think that most of them sort of occupy academia in our country. Now, I think the cultural Marxist is sort of nebulous and sort of dubious because there's no universal definition of it. It's sort of something. It's sort of just a syllogism that popped up to describe people who are sort of they pick it. I would say committed Marxists are not cultural Marxists.
Yeah, committed Marxists. However, I use because it said I use it a certain way. I use it to define Marxists who have adopted precepts of social justice. Social justice as defined by the Swedish political scientist in 1970.
Right, but see, that's the funny thing is that they're not. So the Marxists who have adopted that, they're not Marxists either. So
they're not Marxists anymore, obviously, but
exactly.
They do have some. They do
right,
cherry
they pull
pick
a little bit from Marxist doctrine, and you just.
But what I meant to say is that a social. But the reason why I use that definition because you do have people who follow the precepts of social justice as defined by the Swedish political scientists who don't cherry pick even anything out of Marxism, right? I'll give you an example of one of these original social justice. Chung, after his change of heart after playing Witcher 3. Chung is a classical social justice advocate. As bizarre as the term sounds, but so a cultural Marxist is a social justice advocate who, for some reason, got turned on by some of the things in Marxism and uses conflict sociology to push their social justice agenda. That to me is a cultural Marxist. Holy crap, that's a long explanation.
Right. So, but this is the problem with that term, cultural Marxist. It's not actually recognized by the established dogma. So, you look at the typical Marxist Hegelians, these critical social theory proponents. They all come out of the Frankfurt School, which started with Fichte and Kant, and then Hegel. And you've got Habermas, Jürgen Habermas, and now the big one right now is the this third wave of Frankfurt School intellectuals is now Axel Honneth, and
but the Frankfurt School,
they don't have
go ahead.
they don't have this term cultural Marxism. It's not. So that's why I said cultural Marxism is. They're critical social theorists.
Critical social theorists,
in sort of the Hegelian. So this is the thing. In the 1920s, with the first of the Frankfurt School intellectuals, it was taking, I believe it was Marx's writings, and then it went back to Kant in the 50s, and then the 1950s and 60s, and then Axel Honneth sort of takes the reins, and then his later career. He's like 65 right now. And Habermas is actually still alive, but he's almost dead. And he goes back towards Hegel, and he pulls more from Hegelian philosophy and phenomenology of spirit. They don't have this word cultural Marxism, and that's one of the actual frequent criticisms I hear from people from SJWs. Is like there isn't this thing such as cultural Marxism, and people who use it are just pulling this term out of their ass. Well, it's sort of a syllogism for critical social theory.
Yeah, I don't think it's a name out of its ass. I think it's what's called a vulgaire errant or something. I can never pronounce the term. It's basically like the word Cucksurvitive, right? There is no defining. It's just you got these conservatives that act like social justice warriors. Cucksurvitive. So cultural Marxists.
It's a word to define the phenomena.
Yeah, are social justice advocates who apparently read one book of Marx too many, misunderstood what Marx said, but nonetheless still. And keep in mind, I hate Marxists too, but the point is that they're not honest Marxists either. They took basically they took the concept of conflict sociology and applied it to social justice.
Right, and so so that's the thing. Most people don't really even fucking understand Marx, and by virtue of Marx, Hegel. The interesting thing, the funny thing about this whole phenomenon of cultural Marxism or critical social theory. Is that it stems out of an ideology that's inherently racist. I mean, Hegelian history and Hegelian notion of spirit and the sort of evolution of the state is inherently exclusionary and racist. Hegel certainly thought that there were lesser cultures that should be assimilated into the more intellectual, the more enlightened cultures, and so where Hegel thought it was sort of the consciousness raising of the individual spirit, which gave rise to the consciousness raising of the overall city-state.
Yeah.
Marx thought it was technology. So that technology was the engine of historical change, and then you get this critical social theory, which is sort of enlightenment and emancipation to like oppressed classes, but it's inherently exclusionary. And this is sort of the idea behind. This is sort of the irony behind cultural, quote unquote, cultural Marxists and this new critical social theory is that it is, like you said, very much cherry picking of ideology, and I think this is so. Going back to tie this into this phenomena that I experienced with SPJ, when Koretsky sort of says, "Let's not talk about the past," it's a weird phenomena, but I understand it because there are a lot of. So if you're pulling your ideology from something that, among other things, has sort of been labeled as giving rise to the Nazi Party and fascism. You tend to not
or the Soviet Union,
right?
You're going to be
anti-Marxist to sort of admit that, and so maybe that's where that phenomena comes from. But as far as cultural Marxism is termed, it really pulls from sort of normative natural philosophy and then social theory, which is critical social theory. It's sort of identify what the normative states are, and then what the descriptive states are. And then how do we get from the descriptive to the prescriptive? And, but for cultural Marxism, it's a weird thing. I don't think there are any cultural Marxists in the political
spectrum. Yeah. Now that we define it at least amongst ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Canadian politics. There might be.
We have a social justice warrior candidate. We do have an SJW candidate.
Yeah.
Trudeau. Jesus Christ.
And I don't know about you, Luke, if there are any in the UK. I imagine.
Not really.
I thought all of Labour was SJWs.
No. Actually, the problem with Labour is that we're... Alright, brief tangent because I like talking about this, is that Labour is in the midst of actually maybe electing someone who holds true to traditional Labour values for the first time in, 20
Churchill's
years?
No,
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years, and the man's name is Jeremy Corbyn, and he's like an old-style socialist, which is what Labour was originally. The problem is that if they vote him in, they will never get into power for the next 10 or 20 years.
Why?
Because that's what happened in 1980. That they voted in someone who was lefter than left. He did all the standard left stuff, and for the next 20 years, up until Tony Blair did his New Labour, they weren't in power. That's more or less 3 or 4 different parliaments that they had no say in, essentially, until Tony Blair went and got them 3 elections on the trot. So basically, the fear is that if they elect Corbyn and it turns out actually no, he's not. While his fan base is rabid, is not representative, then Labour will die out as a party, and he'll not completely, but he won't see power again for another 20 years. And by that point, every structure that the British public enjoys will be either privatized or severely cut.
Yeah, but on the flip side, though, and this is obviously, I'm not a full verse of British culture, but if they get someone who's not a socialist, but I don't want to be mean, but Miliband to me seemed like a social justice warrior, not as bad as Trudeau, but almost there. And I'm going like, if they put another Miliband-like character, I don't know if social justice warrior are gaining ground in British voters beyond the university crowd. You know?
I think it would be accurate to say they are not.
Yeah, so I don't think a SJW-ish leader of the Labour would bring the party back either, you know.
No, that wouldn't help either, but that's not the problem. The problem is that they're about to elect as a leader someone who is unelectable to the British electorate.
Yeah. So what kind of candidate can you field?
Someone who... Not someone who carries the Blairite flame, but it's got to be someone who stands around there. So essentially, they're looking for a central leftist rather than a straight-up leftist.
Yeah. So basically, you're defining a bit like Mulcair in Canada, which would be from the conservative perspective, he's a full socialist, but people define him as a soft socialist. He wants government regulation, government interference, but he advocates that no, he's not going to be meddlesome. So you're like, okay, shall me as a conservative, I call hypocrisy on what he says naturally, but generally speaking, he's well spoken, and he kind of focuses on this sort of like, I'm socialist, but I'm not like a commie or like pushing crazy shit or crazy ideas,
Yeah.
I just have these different ways I think the government should be more involved in helping the economy be better, And he's the runner-up. He's actually got a lot of support in Quebec and in and in a couple of other provinces in Canada.
Yes, and ultimately that's the point, is that if he's voted in, he's unelectable. And it's safe to say that there is something of an issue of the... I don't think there's the major splits. Like over here, the right isn't quite as split, but I think it might be getting there.
Yeah.
Because, but it's more along, I don't know why, but it's more along ideological lines than. It's more or less the same lines. It's ideological. It's issues over immigration. It's issues over the right wing trying to appeal to left wing voters.
No. So Connor gets the comparison a bit better. I think McClure would be probably close to your Bernie Sanders. I mean, not exactly, but like just McClure also has like a couple of things in his past people are not too happy about, but I don't. Obviously, so I think that probably is a close comparison. So
Interesting.
Yeah. As that, and Trudeau is Trudeau is a social justice warrior. He fucking takes pictures of himself with topless women at slut walks, kind of thing, and like, you can't be more SJW than that.
No, and
it's economic policy. No, I have to say this because it's funny. His economic policy is from the heart outward. That's his economic policy.
That's sort of.
I think a Canadian pundit once said, "Oh my God, Trudeau is what happens if Tumblr was actually a party, a political party."
Yeah, that would be scary.
Yeah. And to think he's one of our main, and thinking he's one of our major political leaders is a Tumblrina.
Yeah.
Canada's in trouble. Help us.
All right, so wrapping it up. I think it's worth pointing out that the whole name Cucksurvitive is just, it's a flashpoint because of long-standing issues in what appears to be the right, like the split between what appears to be the neocons and the more traditional conservatives and the libertarians who just end up on the right wing for some reason.
No, libertarians make sense that they're right wing. Libertarians believe in a lot of economic freedom, which sadly is usually considered right wing.
True, that's a fair point. Yeah. Though I would say they should be technically separate as well from the right wing.
That's just your British left talking there.
Yeah, yes. Anyway, the point seems to be that it seems to be caused by a massive split and lack of trust from the grassroots and the major heads of the party, and it seems to be only made worse when they're dismissing Trump and his supporters as just being racist, unintelligent bores, when it would be better to find out why people like Trump and how they can attempt to incorporate that message more into more into their stuff.
But to be fair, this is not obviously I'm not going to make this long. But to be fair, the left is experience and experiencing it. I mean, you have people who call themselves now classical liberals, and they really, really, really want to stick it into the progressive. So you're getting this sort of hot divide in the left starting to form between, I would call like maybe mainstream left, people who want to go classical liberal, which are basically left-leaning libertarians. And obviously what we talked about before, the progressives, as the progressives, and you're seeing, and I think the left is going to have its own kerfuffle soon.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. What do you think, Connor? Since you said you were a bit left-leaning, so you probably have a better insight on that one.
Well, I think the left is sort of, I don't know that the left is ipso facto left is going to have sort of a kerfuffle. I think people who identify as left are just going to sort of leave, and so the people who remain, they're going to be the new left, much to their chagrin, I think. Because I think that people are starting. I don't like the term red pill because I think it's sort of ridiculous, but I don't have any other good word for it. But I think sort of people in the left who are tired of PC bullshit are going to get red pilled, and they're just going to leave. But they're not going to go so far right to identify as the right.
Obviously, yeah.
So yeah, I think the left is just sort of culling the herd, and sort of getting out the dissenters and sort of consolidating itself.
Well, what do you think? Where do you think these departing days at the moderate lefts or the lefts who are fed up with PC culture? Where do you think they're going to go?
I think you're just gonna. I think you're gonna get a small portion who are like me, who are politically interested or interested in politics and politically oriented, and they're sort of just gonna. They're gonna go where they sort of feel most comfortable speaking, which will be, probably places like the natural right, natural conservative. Though they're not gonna like it, and they probably won't admit it. I just don't give a shit. I mean, I'm
exactly. Don't get me.
But some people,
go ahead. Yeah.
some people are just not gonna feel comfortable admitting that. So I think that's what's gonna happen. Other people, I think the majority of people are just gonna get. That's what's going to, sort of ostrich them, and they're gonna leave the left, and then they're just not gonna come back to politics. And they're going to go their life.
Yeah. Ironically, they become the disenfranchised voters.
Right. And I think that's what's going to end up happening to the majority of the left. Because the right in this country is fucking insane.
Yeah.
For the most part. They're crazy.
Yeah, I admit that. Even as someone who identifies himself right-wing, I see a lot of American right-wingers to be a little, I don't know, over the top.
They're legitimately insane, I think.
Yeah. I said for me it was easier as a Canadian. I used to be left-wing by even Canadian standards, and when I got fed up with the left, to me it wasn't hard. I just went like, yeah, I'm right-leaning now. And people are like, you're right-wing? I'm like, well, if you're going to accuse me of being right-wing, I'd start rubbing pictures of Adam Baldwin on my chest going like, yeah, I'm right.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to label me right-wing, then I'm going to... Gavin McKines. He was an asshole with the gamer video, but he has a funny one where he's, like, talking like a squeegee anarcho-punk. Like, he's, like, talking about his idea, and then at the end, he's like, wait a minute. This is what being a conservative is? And suddenly you see him transform in a business suit. Fuck it, I'm a conservative. No, I kind of described that. That's the video describe how I feel, right? I'm like, I'm not a conservative. This is what I believe in. Wait a minute, you're telling me that's what a conservative is? Okay, I'm a conservative.
Right.
But you're right. In America, a lot of conservatives are so over the top insane that you're right, as these people might not feel comfortable identifying that they're technically now on the right.
Yeah, and I think it sort of confounds them and perplexes them, and they sort of look around. They look up, and they go, what the fuck? Like, they look around and they ask, they look at their political landscape and they have no fucking clue where they am. So they just stick their head back in the sand and they just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Alright, I think that's a good place to end it. I'd like to thank my guests tonight. It ran over a little bit, and
well, what do you have? A guy who studied journalism and philosophy, and a guy who studied political science.
Yes, I really should have expected it.
Yeah,
this is my mistake. It's been wonderful, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Right, that's it for now. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.